At 9:04 a.m., Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett received a cease and desist letter from Ivanka Trump's legal team. It was crisp, condescending, and unmistakably threatening. They demanded a retraction, a public apology, and warned of imminent legal action if she failed to comply. The offense? A single soundbite. One line spoken into a microphone that had since been clipped, shared, and gone viral across social media. But this wasn't just any line. It was the kind of unfiltered truth that cuts through polished lies like a blade. The kind of line that makes headlines and enemies. By 9:19 a.m., Crockett's attorney had already responded. 15 minutes. That's all it took to go from legal threat to political earthquake. Because the reply didn't just reject the demand, it dismantled it. Line by line, it questioned Ivanka's legal standing, her motives, and her perceived immunity from critique. But more than that, it threw open the gates on a larger question. Who really gets to speak in America? And who's punished for doing it? By 10:00 a.m., hashtags had already begun to trend. Crockett Clapback, First Amendment Queen. Memes, tweets, and fiery threads poured in from across the country. Some laughed, some cheered, and some, in the Trump orbit, started to panic because this wasn't a simple spat. This was a warning shot gone wrong. Ivanka Trump had calculated a move from behind palace walls. She expected silence. She got fire. And Jasmine Crockett? She didn't flinch. She didn't fold. She didn't retreat behind advisors or PR flacks. Instead, she did something most in Washington had forgotten how to do. She stood her ground, unapologetically. What followed would expose more than just a faulty legal claim. It would unveil the fragile ego behind the Trump brand and the steel resolve behind Crockett's calm. But Crockett's lawyer wasn't just responding. She was preparing to flip the entire lawsuit on its head. This was never just about one soundbite. Because the moment Ivanka Trump tried to silence Jasmine Crockett, the fight stopped being personal. It became political. Bigger than two women. Bigger than one lawsuit. This was now a collision between dynastic privilege and grassroots power. And everyone watching could feel it. Crockett's words, sharp, fearless, and unapologetically real, had tapped into a deeper truth. One that made the heirs of power uncomfortable. She hadn't named Ivanka directly, but she had named the pattern. Nepotism, entitlement, the veneer of diplomacy cloaking decades of inherited impunity. And that struck a nerve, because Crockett didn't just speak about the elite. She spoke to them, loudly, publicly, without permission. For Ivanka, the move to sue wasn't about winning in court. It was about control, optics, damage control for a brand that sells poise while dodging accountability. And this lawsuit? It was a playbook move. Use the threat of litigation to drown criticism in paperwork. Reframe offense as victimhood. Weaponize the law not to protect truth, but to punish dissent. But Crockett is no stranger to threats dressed in legalese. She's a former public defender. She stared down prosecutors, judges, and power brokers far more intimidating than a Trump letterhead. She knew this wasn't a legal claim. It was an intimidation tactic. And that made it even more dangerous, because when lawsuits are used to silence sitting members of Congress, especially black women speaking truth to power, what's really on trial isn't defamation. It's democracy. Crockett's district knew it. The internet knew it. Progressive watchdogs knew it. And they started circling like wildfire. Civil rights lawyers, constitutional scholars, advocacy groups, voices began emerging not just in her defense, but in outrage. Why? Because this wasn't the first time. Ivanka wasn't just reacting. She was repeating. Repeating a cycle where elite figures use wealth and access to squash critique. Especially from women. Especially from people of color. Especially when the words hit too close to home. And yet, what made this moment different, what made it volatile, was that Crockett didn't back down. She didn't negotiate. She didn't offer a softened statement. She called it what it was: legal thuggery masquerading as wounded pride. And just when Ivanka thought it would stay quiet, Jasmine's legal team began working the phones. Their strategy wasn't just to defend. It was to document, to expose, to pull back the curtain on every intimidation attempt, past and present, and tie it to a larger narrative America couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just one woman versus another. This was the system versus spotlight, and the spotlight was getting hotter. But Ivanka had underestimated one thing: Crockett wasn't alone, and her legal team was just getting warmed up. Ivanka Trump has always known how to curate an image. From her earliest days modeling in glossy spreads to launching a fashion line built on soft hues and neutral platitudes, she cultivated a brand of whispered power, accessible elegance with a dynasty's backbone. She didn't yell. She didn't rant. She simply appeared, poised, composed, and ever so above the noise. But beneath that veneer was something else: calculation. The kind born not from adversity, but inheritance. Her last name opened doors most never get to knock on. And when her father bulldozed his way into the White House, Ivanka didn't stay in the shadows. She stepped into the West Wing, unelected, unvetted, and unaccountable. There, she became the sanitized face of an administration steeped in chaos. While policies tore families apart and scandals erupted weekly, Ivanka posted filtered photos, curated messages of female empowerment, and posed beside world leaders as if diplomacy could be done in heels. Critics called it complicit. She called it branding. And branding, to Ivanka Trump, is everything. That's why the lawsuit against Jasmine Crockett makes perfect sense when seen through her lens. Not as a legal necessity, but a strategic defense of her curated identity, a PR armor. Because Crockett's words threatened more than her reputation. They threatened the illusion, the image of the calm, collected Trump daughter above the political fray. The one who wasn't like the others. The one who smiled through the storm. But that illusion has cracks. There was the fashion line that folded amid ethical questions, the defiant tweets in defense of her father's worst policies, the photo op at the G20 that sparked global ridicule, and the eerily consistent silence during every moment that demanded moral clarity, from Charlottesville to January 6th. Ivanka built a tower of credibility on the backs of borrowed moments, careful silence, and choreographed appearances. And whenever anyone questioned the integrity of it all, there came the legal muscle. Cease and desist letters have long been part of the Trump toolkit. From journalists to comedians to former staffers, the Trump orbit has sent them like smoke signals, warnings that behind the smiles and slogans lie sharpened teeth. Even in her business ventures, Ivanka relied on intimidation tactics more than innovation. Trademark deals quietly signed with foreign governments. Media outlets nudged to retract or reframe. Unflattering stories buried under the threat of litigation. It's soft censorship, wrapped in civility, and it works, most of the time. Because the targets are usually underdogs, people without legal teams, without platforms, without the bandwidth to fight Goliath and still keep the lights on. But Jasmine Crockett is not most people. She didn't build her name in ivory towers. She built it in courtrooms, defending people the system tried to forget. She earned every inch of her platform. And when she spoke truth to power, she didn't do it for applause. She did it because someone had to. Ivanka thought this would go the way it always had. A letter, a chill, silence. A narrative reclaimed with just enough deniability to keep the spotlight soft. But this time, the light got hotter. The public wasn't just watching, they were participating. They remembered how the Trump empire operated, how it lashed out under pressure, how it relied on fear to protect a facade. This lawsuit wasn't a defense. It was a deflection, a smokescreen thrown up to distract from a simple fact. For all her branding and polish, Ivanka Trump was trying to silence a sitting congresswoman for telling the truth. And in doing so, she reminded the world that no amount of grace, pearls, or Instagram-ready quotes could hide the legacy of impunity she represented. But Ivanka didn't know she was stepping into a storm with a congresswoman whose entire life was built on fighting back. Before she ever held a microphone in Congress, Jasmine Crockett held the hand of a 17-year-old boy who was about to be tried as an adult. He had been accused of stealing a backpack. No evidence, no witnesses, just an officer's word and a stack of assumptions. The prosecution wanted him locked up for 5 years. His family had no money. His school had already suspended him. His record ruined before it even began. Crockett sat beside him in that cold courtroom, her heels tapping a slow rhythm against the tile, and made a promise. They don't get to decide your story. She kept it. The charges were dismissed. The boy went home. That moment wasn't unique. It was typical. Because before Jasmine Crockett became Congresswoman Crockett, she was the kind of attorney who didn't take cases for fame or flash. She took the hard ones, the lost ones, the ones where the odds were so lopsided you'd have to be either crazy or fearless to even try. She was both. Born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, Crockett didn't grow up around polished speechwriters or political donors. She grew up around injustice, around stories that never made the front page but defined entire neighborhoods. She went to law school not for prestige, but because she saw too many people crushed under a system that was never built for them. And when she practiced law in Texas, she saw it up close. Again and again. Black clients overcharged. Latino teens held without cause. Families broken apart by bureaucracy pretending to be justice. She fought, case after case, not to make noise, but to make change. She wasn't chasing headlines. The headlines found her. Especially the day she stood before a courtroom and exposed a police officer who had falsified a report. Her cross-examination was surgical, precise, calm. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just asked the right questions until the officer's entire narrative fell apart under oath. That officer never testified again. The client went free. And Jasmine? She walked out like she always did, silent, head high, heels tapping justice, into every step. But courtroom victories weren't enough. The system was too broken. So she ran for office. At first, no one thought she'd win. She wasn't backed by big money. She didn't come from a political dynasty. What she had was grit, a deep knowledge of the law, and the unshakable belief that the people closest to the pain should be the ones closest to power. She knocked on doors, walked neighborhoods, listened, and when she won, she didn't transform into something else. She brought the courtroom fire to Congress. That's why her viral moments feel different. They're not sound bites for attention. They're flashpoints of authenticity, like when a GOP congressman attempted to educate her on the Constitution, and she calmly recited case law while looking him dead in the eye. Or when she interrupted a hearing to call out the double standard in how her colleagues addressed women of color. She didn't ask for permission. She made space, and people noticed. Not just voters, not just activists, but the old guard, the ones who had grown too comfortable in their silence. Suddenly, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a threat to the carefully balanced status quo, because she's not afraid to say what everyone else tiptoes around. She knows the law, she knows the game, and she knows how to dismantle both when they're used as weapons. So when Ivanka Trump's team sent that letter, when they tried to flex their legacy and shake her into submission, they weren't facing a freshman politician worried about optics. They were facing a former public defender who's been threatened before, who's had to defend her clients, her name, her very existence in rooms filled with people who wanted her quiet. And she never blinked. Her community knows her as the one who shows up to rallies even when the cameras don't. The one who reads every line of a bill before voting. The one who still returns calls from the people who can't pronounce Congresswoman, but know exactly what justice sounds like. Her enemies call her too loud, too direct, too unfiltered. Her supporters call her necessary. Jasmine Crockett is not a headline. She's not a trending topic. She's the kind of leader who survives long after the cameras leave, because her power isn't borrowed, it's built. Brick by brick, case by case, truth by truth. So when Ivanka's team tried to use fear to silence her, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The letter wasn't supposed to go public. Ivanka's team had sent it quietly, expecting quiet in return. A behind-the-scenes threat, carefully worded, designed to make Jasmine Crockett second-guess her fire. But less than 24 hours after it landed in Crockett's inbox, it was everywhere. Screenshots leaked. Phrases like irreparable reputational harm and public apology demanded spread like gasoline across social media. Commentators on the left and right dove in. And by noon, it had a name: the Trump silencing letter. The silence Ivanka counted on cracked, then shattered. And then Jasmine Crockett spoke. At a small press gaggle on Capitol Hill, she stepped to the mic with the same calm she had used in every courtroom before. Her voice was even. Her words? Surgical. "You can send as many letters as you want," she said, pausing just long enough for the cameras to lean in. "I don't scare easy. I've defended people against systems more brutal than the Trump brand. And trust me, I'm not about to start folding now." The clip hit X first. Within minutes, it was trending. Crockett unbothered. Trump threat backfires. Even conservative accounts shared it, some with snide remarks, some in silent awe. CNN ran it on a loop. MSNBC brought on legal experts to dissect the contents of the original letter. On TikTok, creators reenacted the press moment with dramatized background music and courtroom filters. Crockett wasn't just fighting back, she was setting fire to a tired playbook. Ivanka's team, rattled by the sudden storm, tried to regain control. A spokesperson issued a statement that downplayed the letter, calling it a standard legal inquiry and accusing Crockett of turning it into political theater. But the damage was done, and the narrative wasn't theirs anymore. Because something else had started to shift. Journalists began pulling receipts. Articles about previous Trump legal threats resurfaced. An old cease and desist against a comedian. A copyright dispute against a whistleblower. Even a shelved case involving a women's rights advocate who had criticized Ivanka's role in the administration. The pattern couldn't be ignored. When the Trump name gets bruised, the law is often used as a shield and a sword. Meanwhile, Crockett's allies began speaking out. Loudly, Ayanna Pressley tweeted, "Women of color in Congress didn't get here by being quiet. We got here by being right." AOC went live. Crockett's not just defending herself. She's defending all of us who've been told to watch our tone. Even a few moderate Democrats, rarely ones to enter the Twitter fray, shared their support, and then came the unexpected allies. Legal analysts who'd previously worked for conservative firms posted LinkedIn think pieces dissecting the Trump team's legal overreach. A former federal judge appeared on PBS, calling the cease and desist a textbook attempt to intimidate lawful speech. The court of public opinion had convened, and it wasn't siding with Ivanka. Still behind the scenes, the Trump camp wasn't backing off. Ivanka's attorneys quietly followed up, hints of escalation, phrases like defamatory intent and next steps will be pursued, whispered into the inboxes of Crockett's staff. But it didn't matter anymore, because Jasmine Crockett had become something bigger than a defendant. She was now a symbol of resilience, a voice, of the unbreakable will to speak even when silence is safer. And then, without warning, Crockett's lawyer entered the spotlight. And everything changed. The response dropped at 7:42 a.m., no leaks. No teasers. Just a PDF, uploaded in full to Congresswoman Crockett's official website titled RE, Baseless Cease and Desist from Ivanka. Trump's legal counsel, it wasn't just a reply. It was an obliteration. The letter came from Crockett's personal counsel, a former constitutional law professor turned civil rights litigator named Nia Thompson. Known in legal circles as the Scalpel, Thompson didn't write for TV cameras. She wrote for judges and history. Line 1 set the tone. We are in receipt of your correspondence dated, redacted, and respond here not to indulge intimidation, but to extinguish it. By paragraph 2, she was already dismantling the foundations of Ivanka's claim. Your assertion of defamation is unsupported by fact, hollow in merit, and demonstrably contrary to the protections afforded under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Legal Twitter ignited instantly. Legal Eagle DC. This reads like it was carved in marble. BIPOC Bar Watch. This is how you respond to a Trump. Civil Liberty Rex. This isn't just a rebuttal, it's a roadmap for resisting elite weaponization of defamation law. But Thompson wasn't done. Midway through the document, she included a bulleted list of legal precedents, each one a dagger aimed at the Trump team's credibility. New York Times v. Sullivan, 1964. Public figures must prove actual malice. Milkovich v. Lorraine Journal Co., 1990. Opinion is not actionable as defamation. Hustler Magazine, Inc. v. Falwell, 1988. Even outrageous speech is protected if it concerns a public figure. Then she pivoted. Your client's apparent injury is not reputational, but rhetorical. She has lost control of a narrative that, for years, she has shaped through wealth, proximity to power, and silence disguised as grace. That line alone trended for 2 hours, and then came the reversal. In bold font, Thompson wrote, "We demand a formal retraction of your cease and desist within 72 hours. Failure to do so will trigger counter-litigation for malicious prosecution, legal harassment, and abuse of process." The hunter had become the hunted. She closed the letter not with a whimper, but a warning. Let this serve as notice, not just to your office, but to all who seek to silence public servants through legal theatrics. We will not yield. We will not whisper. We will not be bullied into stillness. It was a declaration, not of war, but of principle. It struck a chord far beyond legal communities. Talk shows covered it like a major verdict. On The View, Whoopi Goldberg slammed the letter on the table and declared, "Now that's how you protect the First Amendment." Clips circulated on Instagram with dramatic music layered beneath the boldest passages. Edits appeared on TikTok, set to Kendrick Lamar and Billie Eilish. People weren't just reading the letter, they were performing it, quoting it, living it. And as the hours passed, one question grew louder. Where was Ivanka? For a woman so often on message, her sudden silence was deafening. Her PR team issued no statement. No follow-up letter came. No Fox News appearance, no Instagram post in soft lighting. Just stillness. A pause thick with embarrassment and recalculation. Because for all of Ivanka's attempts to wield the law as a shield, it had turned into a mirror. And in that mirror stood a woman whose threat had backfired catastrophically. The story that was meant to paint Crockett as reckless had now elevated her to the pantheon of political folk heroes, those who do not flinch, who do not fold, who fight like hell not for themselves, but for those who cannot. But what truly rattled the Trump team wasn't just the letter's tone or its citations, it was what the letter revealed. In the appendix, Thompson had attached a timeline of prior cease and desist letters issued by the Trump orbit, dating back years. Several were never made public. A few involved cases that had quietly vanished, from court dockets. One referenced a dispute with a nonprofit director over Ivanka's White House role, a case that had been settled in mediation. The implication was clear. This wasn't an isolated move. It was a pattern. And now for the first time. The pattern had been documented, dismantled, exposed. By nightfall, even some conservative commentators were backing off. One Fox legal analyst admitted on air, Ivanka may have overplayed her hand. This letter, it's going to stick. Behind closed doors, sources whispered that Ivanka was furious, not just at Crockett, but at her own legal team. How did they let this get away from us? One aide allegedly asked. Why didn't we anticipate this kind of counterattack? But there was no undoing it now. The genie wasn't going back in the bottle. Crockett had proven that not all threats work, the same on everyone. That fear has an expiration date when it meets resistance, and that sometimes the very tool used to intimidate becomes the torch that lights the path forward. And just when everyone thought it was over, one detail in the letter left the Trump camp scrambling. The internet did what it always does, but this time it didn't just react. It roared. Within hours of Jasmine Crockett's legal team publishing their takedown, the digital floodgates opened. Screenshots of the letter spread like gospel, passed between activists, legal scholars, influencers, and ordinary users who finally saw someone clap back, not with noise, but with brilliance. The hashtags surged. Crockett Clapback, Ivanka exposed. Sue me please, 1. Tweet posted by The Resistance is Loud read, Ivanka Trump tried to threaten a sitting congresswoman with a legal letter. Jasmine Crockett's lawyer lit it on fire and served it back with precedent and receipts. Absolute masterclass. 100,000 retweets in 24 hours. Another from Black Women Lead simply said, she didn't just protect herself, she defended all of us. Memes exploded. A split-screen photo of Ivanka's smiling press pic beside a snapshot of Thompson's legal letter bore the caption, defamation? Girl, be serious. Even fashion got in on it. A viral Etsy shop began selling mugs printed with the letter's most defiant quote, we will not yield. We will not whisper. We will not be bullied into stillness. Sold out in 4 hours. And then came the TikTok's law students posted dramatic readings of the legal response. One creator layered the text over courtroom visuals with a voiceover that ended, this is how you body a Trump, with footnotes. Others used trending audio to dramatize. Crockett's press moment, slamming down mock letters and mouthing along to, I'm not the one to play with. It wasn't just entertainment. It was vindication. A full-body yes to every time the powerful have tried to weaponize silence. But as the culture soaked in Crockett's win, legal analysts were quietly sounding alarms. And not for Crockett. Ivanka's move, they argued, may have opened the very door she wanted closed. In an interview on MSNBC, a former federal prosecutor noted, once you make a legal threat, you invite legal scrutiny. Discovery works both ways. If this escalates, and it could, Ivanka Trump might be required to disclose internal communications, branding strategies, prior suppression efforts. This is not a door you want to open lightly. CNN's legal panel ran with it. One analyst put it bluntly, Ivanka's cease and desist letter might have created more legal vulnerability for her than the statement she tried to silence. On Capitol Hill, murmurs began. A few House members quietly discussed a resolution defending the right of members of Congress to speak freely without legal intimidation. Free speech watchdogs submitted statements of support. Civil rights attorneys circulated amicus templates in case Crockett's team pursued a countersuit. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Ivanka's effort to suppress criticism had created a megaphone louder than any Crockett had ever used. And while Ivanka remained silent, her allies fumbled. Conservative pundits couldn't agree on a defense. Some insisted it was just a misunderstanding. Others tried to spin it as an overreaction. But their tone lacked bite. They looked like people trying to put out a wildfire with a spray bottle. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was everywhere. She appeared on the readout, where she spoke with measured clarity about the weaponization of law against women of color in politics. On Pod Save America, she joked about keeping a laminated copy of the letter in her purse. And through it all, she remained unshaken. No victory laps, no taunts, just facts, framed with dignity. Support poured in from places she hadn't expected. An op-ed in The Guardian called her the new face of principled resistance. A viral thread from an immigrant rights group compared her stand to other iconic legal fights, writing, "There's a straight line from defending the voiceless in court to defending the people in Congress. Jasmine Crockett walks it daily." It became clear. This wasn't just about one lawsuit. Crockett had become something more than a legislator. She was now a symbol of what it looks like when truth doesn't flinch, when intelligence beats intimidation, when a daughter of St. Louis outmaneuvers a daughter of Manhattan, with the Constitution on her side. And yet, it was Jasmine Crockett's final speech that would leave the nation stunned. The podium was plain. No banners, no teleprompters. Just Jasmine Crockett standing beneath the Capitol dome, surrounded by reporters, supporters, and the unmistakable tension of a nation that had been watching, waiting. She took a breath, looked into the cameras, and began, not with anger, but with purpose. "I want to be clear," she said. "This was never about one letter, or one name, or even one insult." A pause. "This was about what we allow powerful people to get away with when they don't like being told the truth." No one moved, Crockett continued. "We live in a country where some people are born into microphones, where their voices are inherited, passed down like property, where criticism feels foreign to them, because their entire lives have been curated to avoid it." She didn't name Ivanka. She didn't have to. But then there are the rest of us. The people who weren't born with a name that opens doors. The people who had to fight to be heard, who had to earn every inch of ground with sweat, scars, and stubbornness. Her voice softened. "When I became a public defender, I didn't do it because it looked good on a resume. I did it because I saw too many people, black, brown, poor, being crushed by silence. And I swore I would never be silent again." A beat passed. "I ran for Congress not to win power, but to serve people, to speak when others couldn't, to stand up when it was easier to sit down. And when someone tries to use their last name as a weapon to quiet me? My answer is simple. I've been louder than your fear my whole life." The crowd behind her stirred. Ivanka Trump may not understand what it's like to grow up unheard, to work twice as hard for half the respect. But I do. Millions of Americans do. And we're tired of pretending that inherited power is the same as earned credibility. She looked out into the press pool, her tone growing steady. "Let this be a reminder. Public service is not a brand. It's not about photo ops. It's not about silencing critique. It's about showing up, every day, for the people who believed in you when you had nothing but your word." The moment swelled. We don't all come from dynasties. But we do come from communities. We come from sacrifice, from perseverance, from truth. And that truth? It's louder than any cease and desist letter will ever be. She stepped back slightly, letting her words breathe. "So no, I won't apologize for telling the truth. I won't retract my voice. And I won't let fear win. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever." Then, with that same quiet fire that had carried her from courtroom to Congress, she closed. "If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, let this moment be your proof. It does. If you've ever been told to sit down, to shut up, to be respectful in the face of injustice. Don't. Speak, stand, resist. Because America doesn't just belong to the privileged. It belongs to us, the people. We, the people. She stepped away from the mic. And as the crowd broke into applause, as the tweets reignited, as pundits scrambled to write new headlines, one thing had become crystal clear. Jasmine Crockett had done more than win a debate. She had delivered a lesson, one that echoed far beyond Washington. So what comes next? That depends on all of us. Ivanka Trump sent a legal threat. Jasmine Crockett turned it into a national moment of courage, clarity, and conviction. What was meant to be a silencing tactic became a masterclass in resistance. A congresswoman stood her ground, not with insults, but with law. Not with fear, but with fire. And in doing so, she reminded millions of us. Truth doesn't need permission to speak. This wasn't just a legal exchange. It was a mirror. A moment that asked, what would you do if someone tried to silence your truth? Crockett showed us what it looks like to fight back with dignity. She didn't just defend her name. She defended our right to call power what it is, to speak without fear, to be loud, unapologetic, and informed. So here's the question. Are you ready to do the same? Because this platform, this community, isn't just about watching the news. It's about reshaping it. Together we spotlight the people who won't fold, who speak truth, who rise in the face of intimidation. If you believe in calling out corruption and backing it up with facts, if you believe that being underestimated is a weapon when you know how to wield it, if you believe in people like Jasmine Crockett and the future they're building, then hit that subscribe button. Share this story. Add your voice to this moment. Be loud. Be unapologetic. Be informed, because the fight for truth isn't just in courtrooms or Congress. It's everywhere, and it starts with you.